It's no secret that 2020 has had a lot going on. Primarily, obviously, our COVID-19 pandemic, lots of civil justice issues coming to the forefront, and 2020 is an election year. Now, all of those events have ethical implications not only on ourselves as members of society, but our government and our businesses located here in the U.S. and foreign entities that work here in the U.S. Now, that means that whether everyone likes it or not, ethics is at the forefront of our conversations right now. I know a little bit about ethics in business. Both of my parents are business people. My mother is an operating partner of a bakery here in Jacksonville, and my father's been a real estate agent for 15 years. Both jobs requiring you to follow strict ethical codes to make sure that you are running your business fairly and effectively. Now, today I want to talk to you about the state of ethics in business in 2020. First, I'm going to give you a look at what ethics is and how it applies to business. Then I'm going to give you a real-world look at a corporate actual situation having to do with unethical practices. Then I hope to give you a preview to ethics in business for the rest of 2020 and likely beyond. Now, in order to talk about ethics in business, we need to first know what ethics is. And to really know what ethics is, we have to talk about morality. Morality is just your personal set of beliefs about good and bad behavior, and then ethics is kind of a code of morality. Morality kind of changes throughout your life, but ethics is more of a solid, stagnant kind of set of rules. Now, when that comes to business, there's a lovely Investopedia article that talks about the many components of ethics in business. First being, ethics in business is kind of a top-down effect. That means if you have ethical leadership, you're most likely to have ethical employees, and if you have unethical leadership, your employees will probably be practicing unethical standards. Now, another thing that's important is to remember that ethical codes kind of vary by industry, meaning we wouldn't look to BP to have the same sort of ethical codes and standards as we would Amazon, because BP is an environmental-based kind of company. We're going to look for them to follow environmental codes. But Amazon, on the other hand, we're going to look for them to be ethical about how they treat their employees and how they're sourcing their materials that they sell. It's really important to keep in mind that when it comes to ethics by industry, you keep them separated because it's really hard to judge everyone by the same scale if we were to not do that. Now, there's also many benefits to companies to being ethical. If you're an ethical company, you are a profitable company. Reputation determines whether or not businesses want to invest in you, so if you don't have a good reputation, you're not going to have a lot of investors and it's going to affect your shareholders. Now, a perfect example of this is the Skadden Manafort scandal. Now, Skadden Arps is a law firm based in New York City but operating globally. It's probably the largest law firm in the world. It deals with large businesses and high-profile clients, such as Paul Manafort. Now, in 2012, Paul Manafort hired Skadden, and a small team at Skadden really, to conduct an analysis of Ukraine's prosecution practices. And then in order to take that and distribute it amongst people he was lobbying to in D.C. and obviously the Ukrainian government, one of his clients. Now, Skadden got paid $4.6 million for their work. Greg Craig was the head partner that kind of led this team. He's the one that gave the reports to Manafort, and he also went ahead and distributed it to the New York Times and gave an interview on that as well. Now, Greg Craig was supposed to disclose his work under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which covers foreign entities working with the U.S. government, meaning if a foreign entity is trying to lobby the U.S. government or the U.S. government is contracting out, we're supposed to be registering this so that the U.S. Department of Justice kind of knows what's going on. Craig deceived Skadden and the Justice Department by not registering this and not telling anyone that he didn't register. Further unethical behavior went on when Manafort sent him an email of his praises, and then that resulted in Greg Craig turning around and encouraging his fellow partners at Skadden to hire Paul Manafort's daughter, who had been previously rejected for a job at Skadden, which is highly competitive. Now, the value for society as a whole when it comes to this Skadden thing is that, don't you want to know who, in terms of foreign agents, is working with the U.S. government, who is trying to lobby to create policy? You'd think you do. That's what FARA exists for. And by deceiving FARA, the Justice Department and Skadden, Greg Craig created kind of definitely unethical practices, according to the Justice Department, not exactly illegal. Additionally, the hiring of his daughter, that's just unethical lines that you don't really cross. It's quid pro quo. The balance in varying stakeholder interests. How big law firms work is you are either an equitable partner or non-equitable partner. If you're an equitable partner, it means you had a buy-in when you became a partner. You own stake in the firm. If you're a non-equitable partner, don't have to worry about that. But large partners in the firm are equitable partners. So not only were his fellow lawyers, his fellow partners deceived by this and hurt by this, the actual technical shareholders in Skadden were affected by this. But luckily, Greg Craig no longer works for Skadden. Skadden went ahead and paid back the $4.6 million that it earned to the United States government with settling with the Justice Department, and they've retroactively kind of made a statement about it, said that they will definitely make sure they register with FARA, so you don't necessarily have to worry about Skadden interfering like that moving forward. Now, I kind of want to shift to the future of ethics in business, at least for the remainder of 2020. I definitely think there will be an increased focus on boardroom diversity, but not just as we've seen in the past few years, a trend on gender diversity, definitely race, socioeconomic background, whether or not they come from a first-generation immigrant family. All of these things are key factors to your boardroom as discussed by the Harvard Business Review. Now, another thing that I think is going to be very focused on moving forward is encouraging employee input. Now, I think a lot of acceptance of internal feedback is just as valuable, if not more valuable, as acceptance of external feedback and kind of external opinion on how your business is running. In conclusion, we've discussed ethics and how it fits into business, a real corporate example of unethical practices, and finally we talked about where ethics is heading in the future. As we wrap up the back half of 2020, make sure to keep an eye on important social justice issues, as I'm sure those will drive the focus of ethics in business in 2020. Thank you.